In today's Tailgate Talk, we're going to talk about shingle versus metal. Let's talk about the differences. So I get asked a lot, which is better, a shingle roof or a metal roof? And there's a lot of people out there who think a metal roof is automatically better because they think that it lasts for forever. And that isn't true, and that's not a great reason to buy one. So I want to walk you through, as with most decisions in life, there's pros and cons to both. So let's just walk through them and talk about each one. Okay, up here, what I'm comparing, just to make it clear, I'm comparing a dimensional shingle roof, not a 3-tab roof. So I'm using a GAF Timberline HD shingle is what we typically use. And on a metal roof, I'm using a 24 gauge metal roof. With metal, there's different gauges, and usually it's kind of like golf. The lower the number, the better it is. So a lot of roofing companies out there use 26 gauge right now. That's not as good as 24 gauge. When you get to 22 gauge, you can't get screws to go through it without pre-drilling holes. So generally 24 gauge is the best you can get. If you go to like Home Depot and just buy their corrugated metal, that is crap. It's usually 29 gauge and you can't walk on it. It crinkles, you can hear it. It's terrible stuff. Anyway, so that's what we're comparing. I'm going to start with energy. Metal is put on just the way it is. Metal is definitely more energy efficient than shingles, and the reason that it's more energy efficient is because it's highly reflective, especially if you just go with an unpainted galvalume, which means like the metal, the gray roof. Now there are things, I put a ... here because there are things that you can do to a shingle roof to make it more energy efficient. You can do, one thing we've talked about is if your attic has that spray and foam, that stuff is awesome, and you won't have any ventilation on your roof because you've got that spray and foam insulation up in your attic. That stuff is great and highly energy efficient. If you don't have that and you're putting down a shingle roof, there's actually underlayment you can put underneath the shingles that is radiant barrier. It's reflective on one side. We put the shiny side down and put the shingles over the top. And also, when any kind of roof, it doesn't matter if it's shingle or metal, your ventilation is key, and we'll probably talk about ventilation in a different Tailgate Talk because it's a whole 30 minutes on its own. But your ventilation is what makes your roof energy efficient. Some people ask me with shingles, if they get a lighter colored shingle, is that more energy efficient than a darker colored shingle? And people used to think that, but honestly, it's really like lipstick on a pig. They're all made out of tar and asphalt, and all shingles are hot, and it doesn't really matter what color grit you put on the top. The function of grit is not to be energy efficient, it's to protect the shingle from UV light, and that's another talk too. But okay, cost. So in general, metal is going to cost you, uncolored, just plain galvalume, is going to cost you about double as a laminate shingle. So if you're after value, shingles are definitely the way to go. Now, part of the reason why the costs are so much higher with metal, well, it costs more because it's metal, but another reason why it costs more is because with shingles, we only use a waste factor of 15% generally, and these are generally, it depends on how cut up your roof is, if it's a straight gable, if you have hips, all that good stuff. And metal, we have to go with 30% waste. And the reason why the waste is so high on the metal roof is because you have to overlap, there's a lot of overlap on your panels and crimping, and so you lose a lot, and you can't, if you roll out a panel and you cut off the last bit, you can't. With a shingle, you can probably reuse that last bit, but with metal, you can't. It's just garbage. So that's part of what drives your costs up. Now the years, here's where people think that metal lasts for forever. It really doesn't. The manufacturer warranty on the 50-year dimensional shingle from GAF is 50 years. On metal, most manufacturers, and we use McElroy and Quality Metals a lot, and Barrage, they're 25 years. They're not all that way. If you go to the website and look it up, you'll see that some are 20, some are 25, and some are 30. But in general, the average is 25 years. Now, is it really only going to last 25 years? No, that's just a manufacturer warranty. So for reals, what's it going to last? The shingle for real is going to last 50 years, as long as you don't get an act of God. And the metal is probably going to last about 50 years, again, if you don't get an act of God, because an act of God will destroy both. It does take larger hail to get the metal roof than the shingle, but it can still get it. What happens at 50 years with metal? I thought it lasted for forever. It oxidizes and it will actually rust out. It gets dented by hail. It becomes brittle, and that's another talk. But when metal roofs get to be like 100 years old, which a lot of the ones in New Braunfels are, they become brittle, and when you walk on them, they can actually break, and you get hairline cracks in them, and then you'll get leaks. Wind rating, this is where metal is better. If you just put the manufacturer required nails in a dimensional roof, it's going to have 110 mile an hour wind rating. You can put 6 nails in there and you'll get 130 mile an hour wind rating. In general, standing seam metal is going to get 140 mile an hour wind rating. So there it's better. Curb appeal. Laminate, or I call it a laminate, that's insurance talk, but a dimensional shingle is very sexy. It looks very good. Especially when you put the high profile ridge caps on there like we do. It has great curb appeal. But depending on your neighborhood, you always want to look at your neighborhood, by the way. If you have all shingle roofs, then you probably want to stick with a shingle roof. But if you're out like in River Chase, your curb appeal with a metal roof is way better. And an interesting fact, when you do home improvement projects, you usually, like kitchen remodel, bath remodel, swimming pool is probably the worst. You don't get your money back out of those improvements when you go to the sale. But roofing is one of the only items they say you do get 100% back out of the sale. So if you do come out of pocket and pay double for your roof, for the metal, when you go to sell, you should get that money back in your sales price. So it depends on what you're after. Generally, as a rule of thumb, what I tell people is the best reason to get metal is for aesthetics. If you love the way it looks and you think your house is going to look amazing with that metal roof, then you should get it. If you want to get it because you think it's the last roof you'll ever have to put on, that's not a good reason.